Compass followers are famous because they did not deviate from their core values when it counted most. Their jobs brought them into difficult, even life-threatening situations where they were certainly tested under pressure.
Erin Gruel was a young, idealistic teacher who believed she could make a difference in the lives of inner-city kids in Los Angeles. The movie Freedom Writers was based on her true story. Her students had grown up surrounded by gang violence and had fallen through the cracks of the educational system. Erin became an advocate for their right to an equal opportunity, and she didn't stop fighting for and encouraging her students until they had achieved more than they ever expected possible. Today, many of them are college graduates, and some are teachers themselves.
Another famous Compass follower is Captain Chesley Sullenberger. Captain Sully successfully landed Flight 1549 in the Hudson River after losing both engines when a flock of geese struck the plane. Captain Sully is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and subscribes to the Airman's Creed that binds him to service and excellence. The values Captain Sully has repeatedly mentioned in interviews since his heroic landing are training, preparation, and skill. The sum of all his life experience, along with countless hours of flight time, both in practice and for real, and having clearly defined core values, are what set him up for success on January 15th of 2009.
If any one group of people stand to illustrate what it means to be tested under pressure and persevere, the responders and civil servants who risked their health and lives on September 11th is that group. In their jobs, firefighters and police officers claim core values such as integrity, courage, and commitment. Medical personnel claim core values such as compassion and service. But in all reality, each responder that day had a choice to make: risk my own safety to adhere to these values which I claim, or save myself. They chose to adhere to their core values, again and again, hour after grueling hour. They saved many lives and inspired a nation, proving that we really do influence others when our walk matches our talk.
Some Compass followers are famous for sticking to their guns outside of their work environment. They stood for something concrete in their lives and did not waver under pressure even when little or no reward would come of it.
In his youth, Paul Rusesabagina had witnessed his parents harboring would-be victims of genocide. As an adult, when the horror of genocide came again to his homeland of Rwanda, he reflected on the value his parents had instilled in him many years before, to always help anyone who needed protection. Hotel Rwanda is the true story of his life as the manager of a 4-star hotel in the capital of Rwanda when the 1994 genocide began. He had gained great influence in that position and had many connections with powerful people. He has told interviewers that he believes most situations can be diffused through calm and perseverant discussion. Once, when rebels in the street handed him a gun and directed him to begin killing, he was able to reason with them until they let him go his way. Through influence and quick thinking, he was able to shelter over 1,200 people in his hotel until they could be moved to safety.
Pat Tillman made headlines when he left the NFL to enlist in the Army, but his strict and admirable adherence to his core values are what made him a household name. Early in his career, Tillman turned down a 5-year, $9 million contract with the St. Louis Rams out of loyalty to his then-current team, the Arizona Cardinals. The terrorist attacks on September 11th significantly impacted him. Shortly after that tragic date, he announced his intention to enlist in the Army. In one interview after the announcement, he stated that the other men in his family had served in the armed forces as well, and he downplayed his own sacrifice, saying he, quote, hadn't done a thing, really. Before he left to fulfill his service duties, he felt he owed his team his dedication first and foremost, and finished out the 15 remaining games of the 2001 season. He then turned down a 3-year, $3.6 million contract extension from the Cardinals because of his enlistment. Tillman's priority was always the duty at hand, first to his teammates, then to his country.
Growing up, Rosa Parks attended a private school funded by liberal-minded women from the northern U.S. The school's philosophy of self-worth, as well as her mother's advice to her to, quote, take advantage of the opportunities, no matter how few they were, shaped her into a woman who stood for equality. Then during the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, she put into action the principles of nonviolent protest, which she had subscribed to for many years. She stated that she knew exactly what she was doing that day when she refused to move from her seat on the bus, and she was aware of and prepared to accept the consequence of arrest. Mrs. Parks influenced Martin Luther King Jr. with her methods and her personal conviction, and her leadership influenced a nation so much that her casket was placed in the rotunda of the United States Capitol for 2 days when she died. She's the only woman in American history to lie in state at the Capitol, an honor usually reserved for U.S. presidents.
In his letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. explained that peace at all costs was not peace at all. He stood for what he called positive peace, that which would come when the dignity of all people was respected. The so-called peace that he would not tolerate was the passive acceptance of the way things were. He taught that men and women must be so accountable for their actions that before a protest could take place, they must first complete steps of fact-finding, negotiation, and self-purification. Even though they knew they were on the right side of the issue, there was no room for fault, which some could turn against them. He also taught that conscientious objectors to the law must willingly bear the consequences of breaking it. He was jailed, persecuted, and ultimately assassinated while adhering to this ideal.
Oskar Schindler is a superb example of a man who appeared on the surface to have one set of values, but when he was tested in very difficult and dangerous circumstances, he proved to adhere to quite a higher standard. A member of the Nazi Party and a shrewd businessman, he saw dollar signs in Poland during the war. He acquired a munitions factory there and hired over 1,000 Jews, simply because they were the cheapest labor available. He was quoted as saying that he knew the people who worked for him, and so he had to treat them humanely. And so, as the brutality of the Holocaust escalated, his protection of the workers was necessitated. Then, in 1942, he witnessed Jews being packed into trains, and he knew their fate. He later said that, beyond that day, no thinking person could fail to see what would happen. I was now resolved to do everything in my power to defeat the system. For the remainder of the war, he spent his riches and his time scheming ways to protect the Jews who he now called his children. Every dime he had went to feed them food, which he purchased on the black market, and he used his influence and his cunning skills of persuasion to protect them. In the end, he used his value of opportunism to propagate his more newly revealed values, humanity and decency.